Hi Reddit. Throwaway account here because I really need advice, and I cannot risk anyone I know finding this. My name is Alex, and I am 36 years old. I have been married to my wife, Rachel, who is 34, for almost 10 years. We live in a small town in Ohio, and I work as a high school history teacher while Rachel works as a project manager for a local event planning company. Our marriage has always been solid, or at least, that is what I believed. Rachel and I have had our ups and downs like any couple, but we have always worked through them. Or so I thought. The last few months, however, have been different. Subtle changes in Rachel's behavior started to set off alarm bells in my mind, though I could not quite put my finger on what was wrong. It started innocently enough. Rachel began spending more time at work, claiming she was working late on a big event for a corporate client. I did not think much of it at first. Her job can be demanding, especially during the busy seasons, so I chalked it up to the usual workload. But as the late nights piled up, I started to notice other changes. She became more protective of her phone, always keeping it face down or taking it with her everywhere she went. She also seemed more distant, less interested in spending time together. Conversations became surface level, and her laughter, once so effortless, seemed forced. One evening, as Rachel was getting ready to head to the office, I offered to drive her there since her car had been acting up. She immediately declined, saying she was meeting her coworkers at a nearby event space and it would not be necessary. The way she said it, too quickly, too rehearsed, sent a chill down my spine. Something was off. My suspicion grew stronger the following week when I noticed her coming home, wearing perfume I had never smelled before. It was subtle, but I knew Rachel's signature scents, and this one was not one of them. I asked her about it casually, and she laughed it off, saying one of her coworkers had spilled some on her jacket accidentally. It sounded plausible, but something about her tone made me doubt her. Then there was the issue with her car. I had offered several times to fix it or take it to a mechanic, but she insisted it was fine. The thing is, I knew it was not fine. I had driven it recently and noticed the weird grinding noise. Why would she avoid letting me handle it? Unless she was using it as an excuse for something else. The breaking point came when I found an unfamiliar receipt in the trash. It was for a luxury hotel downtown, one Rachel and I had never been to, and it was dated for a night she had supposedly been working late. My heart dropped as I stared at it, the pieces of the puzzle starting to form a picture I did not want to see. Despite the growing evidence, I still tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe the receipt was for work. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then something happened that completely shattered my denial. Rachel came home one night with a small bag of cleaning supplies, saying she had picked them up for the office. I found it odd. Why would she buy cleaning supplies for work? Later, when I looked inside the bag, I found a single item that seemed completely out of place, a small packet of golf tees. Rachel has never played golf in her life, and neither have I. It seemed so random and out of character, but when I asked her about it, she shrugged and said, "Oh, I must have grabbed the wrong thing off the shelf." It felt like a small detail, but it gnawed at me. Something about her casual dismissal did not sit right. Why would she even be buying cleaning supplies and accidentally grab golf tees? It made no sense. I started to wonder if Rachel was hiding something, and the golf tees were somehow connected. My curiosity grew into an obsession, and I decided to dig deeper. After finding the golf tees, my suspicion turned into a full-blown need for answers. I could not ignore the strange signs anymore. The late nights, the hotel receipt, the distant behavior. Something was going on, and I had to figure out what. But how do you confront someone you love when you are not entirely sure they are guilty? I decided to gather more evidence before saying anything to Rachel. I started by checking the hotel receipt again. It listed a date and time when Rachel was supposedly working late. There was also a note about room service, a bottle of wine, and 2 entrees. My chest tightened as I imagined Rachel sharing that meal with someone else, laughing and smiling the way she used to with me. I needed to know more, so I called the hotel and asked if they could provide me with additional information about the stay, pretending to be Rachel's assistant. Unfortunately, the front desk clerk said they could not disclose anything due to privacy policies. I hung up, frustrated but more determined than ever. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention to Rachel's schedule. She claimed she had another late-night event planning session coming up, and my gut told me it was a lie. So, on the evening of her supposed work meeting, I decided to follow her. I parked a few blocks away from our house and waited for Rachel to leave. When she finally did, I followed her car at a safe distance, careful not to be noticed. My heart raced as she drove past her office and continued toward the outskirts of town. She eventually pulled into the parking lot of a golf course, a place we had never visited together. I parked nearby and watched as Rachel got out of her car. She was dressed casually, but I noticed she had put on makeup and that unfamiliar perfume again. My stomach churned as I watched her walk toward the clubhouse. A man was waiting for her near the entrance, a tall, fit guy who looked to be in his late 30s. He smiled when he saw her, and she hugged him like they were old friends, or maybe something more. I sat there in shock, unable to move. Who was this guy? Why was Rachel meeting him here, of all places? I decided to wait and see what would happen next. Rachel and the man disappeared into the clubhouse, and I debated whether to follow them inside. My nerves were on edge, and I felt like my heart might beat out of my chest. I finally worked up the courage to go in, but I kept my distance, pretending to be a casual visitor. The clubhouse was cozy, with large windows overlooking the golf course. I spotted Rachel and the man sitting at a table near the corner, talking animatedly. They seemed completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to the world around them. I felt a surge of anger and pain as I watched them. This was not a business meeting. This was something far more personal. After about an hour, they got up and headed outside toward the course. I followed at a distance, careful to stay hidden. They walked along one of the paths, laughing and chatting like they did this all the time. At one point, the man leaned in and kissed her. My heart shattered as I watched Rachel kiss him back. I left before they could notice me, unable to bear seeing any more. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was this guy? And why the golf course? It seemed like such a strange place for an affair, but maybe that was the point. It was discreet, out of the way, and unlikely to raise suspicion. When Rachel came home later that night, I pretended to be asleep. I could not bring myself to confront her yet. I needed time to process what I had seen and figure out my next move. The next day, I confided in my best friend, Mark. We had been friends since college, and I trusted him to give me honest advice. "Man, that is brutal," Mark said after I told him everything. "I cannot believe Rachel would do that to you. What are you going to do?" "I do not know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to confront her right now, but another part of me is terrified. What if she denies it? Or worse, what if she admits it?" "You need to get your facts straight first," Mark said. "If you go into this half-prepared, she might twist things around or try to gaslight you. Gather as much evidence as you can and then confront her when you are ready." Mark's advice made sense, but it also filled me with dread. The thought of spying on Rachel felt wrong, but I knew it was the only way to get the truth. Over the next few days, I started keeping a closer eye on Rachel's schedule. I noticed she had another late night coming up, and I decided to follow her again. This time, I brought my camera to capture proof. Sure enough, Rachel drove back to the golf course and met the same man. They followed the same pattern, chatting in the clubhouse before heading out onto the course. I snapped photos from a distance, capturing every moment. My hands shook as I reviewed the images later. There was no denying what I had seen. This was a full-blown affair. Armed with evidence, I knew it was time to confront Rachel. That evening, when she came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised to see me sitting there, as I usually worked late on Thursdays. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing home so early?" "I think you know why," I said, my voice steady but cold. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I know about the golf course, Rachel," I said, holding up my phone with the photos. "I know about him." Her face turned pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might faint. "Alex, I can explain." "Save it," I interrupted. "I want the truth, Rachel. All of it." Rachel stood there, frozen, her face pale as she stared at the photos on my phone. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then, she slowly sat down on the couch, her hands trembling. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stayed standing, unable to sit. My emotions were a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and confusion. "Sorry? That's all you have to say? Who is he, Rachel?" How long has this been going on? She looked down at her hands, avoiding my gaze. His name is Eric, she said quietly. We met at a client event a few months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen, Alex. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, my voice rising. You don't accidentally cheat on your husband, Rachel. You made a choice. You lied to me, to my face, and now you're trying to downplay it like it's nothing? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not yet. I know I made a mistake, she said. I know I hurt you, but I need you to understand. It wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt lost, lonely. Eric made me feel like someone cared. Her words felt like a slap to the face. I cared, Rachel. I've always cared. And if you were feeling lonely or lost, you could have come to me. We could have worked through it together. Instead, you ran off to some guy at a golf course. She flinched, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. After Rachel's confession, the house felt like a war zone. The air was heavy with tension, and neither of us knew how to move forward. Rachel offered to go stay with her sister for a few days to give me space, and I agreed. I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted. While she was gone, I reached out to Mark again. He listened patiently as I vented my frustrations and doubts. Do you think you can forgive her? Mark asked after I finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me feels like I'll never be able to trust her again. But another part of me, I still love her, Mark. I hate what she did, but I can't just turn off my feelings. Mark nodded. It's okay to feel conflicted. This is a huge betrayal, and you need to take the time to process it. Don't rush into any decisions. His advice made sense, but it didn't make the situation any easier. I spent the next few days going over everything in my mind, replaying the moments that led us to this point. I couldn't stop wondering, was there something I could have done differently? Or was this entirely on Rachel? When Rachel returned home, she looked like she had been crying nonstop. She apologized again, promising to do whatever it took to fix our marriage. She suggested counseling, saying she was willing to go alone or with me if I wanted. I told her I needed time to think about it. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer lightly, and I needed to be sure I was ready before taking that step. Rachel's suggestion of counseling lingered in my mind for days. I wasn't sure if I was ready to sit in a room and pour my heart out to a stranger while she did the same. But I also couldn't ignore the small part of me that wanted to believe there was still hope for us. After all, we had shared nearly a decade of life together. Could one terrible decision erase all of that? One evening, as we sat in tense silence at the dinner table, I finally broke the ice. I'll go to counseling, I said, my voice steady but firm. But I'm not promising anything, Rachel. I'm doing this for clarity, for both of us. Rachel's face softened with relief. Thank you, Alex. I know I don't deserve this, but I'll do everything I can to make things right. A week later, we found ourselves sitting in a small, cozy office with a therapist named Dr. Hayes. She was a calm, kind woman in her 50s who immediately made me feel at ease. After some introductions, she asked us to explain why we were there. Rachel spoke first, her voice trembling. I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed Alex, and I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. But I want to try. I love him, and I want to save our marriage. Her words hit me hard, but I kept my emotions in check. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and said, I feel like I don't even know Rachel anymore. I don't understand why she did this, and I don't know if I can ever trust her again. But I need answers, and I need to figure out if this marriage is worth saving. Dr. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. It's clear that both of you are in a lot of pain. Rebuilding trust after infidelity is one of the hardest things a couple can do, but it's not impossible. The first step is understanding what led to this and whether both of you are truly committed to moving forward. The first few sessions were brutally honest. Rachel admitted that she had felt neglected over the past year, especially as I became more focused on work. She said she had tried to talk to me about it, but felt like I wasn't listening. When Eric came along, he gave her the attention she had been craving. Hearing this was painful. I had always thought I was a good husband, caring, supportive, attentive. But her words made me question everything. Had I really been so blind to her feelings? Or was this just her way of justifying her actions? Dr. Hayes helped us navigate these difficult conversations, encouraging us to dig deeper into our emotions. She reminded Rachel that her feelings of loneliness didn't excuse her behavior and that rebuilding trust would require complete transparency on her part. For my part, I had to confront my own role in the breakdown of our marriage. It wasn't easy, but it forced me to reflect on the ways I might have unintentionally contributed to Rachel's unhappiness. Rachel knew that if we were going to move forward, she had to earn my trust back. She offered complete transparency, giving me access to her phone, email, and social media accounts. She also cut off all contact with Eric, even going as far as blocking his number and deleting him from her life entirely. At first, I checked her phone obsessively, looking for any signs of dishonesty. But over time, I found myself doing it less and less. Rachel's actions matched her words, and slowly, I began to feel like she was truly committed to making things right. One evening, she came to me with tears in her eyes. "Alex, I want to tell you everything," she said. "I don't want there to be any secrets between us anymore." We sat down, and she told me the full story, how she met Eric, how their relationship escalated, and how she had been consumed with guilt every step of the way. It was painful to hear, but it also gave me the clarity I had been craving. For the first time, I felt like I could start to put the pieces together. As we worked through our issues in therapy, we also began to rebuild the emotional and physical intimacy that had been missing from our marriage. It started with small gestures, a kind word here, a shared laugh there. Over time, those small moments began to add up, creating a sense of connection that we hadn't felt in years. One night, as we lay in bed, Rachel turned to me and said, "Thank you for giving me a chance, Alex. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "It's not just for you, Rachel. It's for us. I'm doing this because I still believe in what we had." Healing after betrayal is not a straight line. Despite the progress Rachel and I had made in therapy, there were days when the pain came rushing back, hitting me like a wave. Something as simple as a song on the radio or a passing comment could trigger memories of what had happened, and I'd feel the anger and sadness all over again. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together, Rachel's phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it instinctively, and though it was just a spam notification, it brought back the gut-wrenching feeling I'd had when I first suspected her infidelity. My mood soured instantly, and Rachel noticed. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but concerned. I hesitated, not wanting to ruin the moment, but I knew I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up. "Sometimes I still get these flashes of everything," I admitted. "It's like I can't escape it, no matter how hard I try." Rachel put down the knife she was holding and turned to me, her eyes filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I hate that I've caused you this pain. I wish I could take it all back." Her apology felt sincere, but it didn't erase the hurt. "I know you're sorry," I said, "and I know you're trying, but it's going to take time for me to fully trust you again." Rachel nodded. "I understand, and I'll wait as long as it takes." At our next therapy session, I brought up my lingering feelings of mistrust and doubt. Even when things are good, I can't shake the fear that it might happen again. I told Dr. Hayes. How do I move past that? Dr. Hayes leaned forward, her expression empathetic. "Alex, trust is like a muscle. It has to be rebuilt gradually. It's natural to feel guarded after a betrayal, but part of the healing process is learning to let go of that fear, bit by bit. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to focus on the present rather than the past." Her words resonated with me, but they also felt like a tall order. How could I let go of the past when it still loomed so large in my mind? One night, Rachel surprised me with a gesture that showed me how deeply she wanted to rebuild our relationship. She handed me a small notebook and said, "I've been journaling since everything happened. It's not much, but I want you to read it. I want you to see how I've been processing this and how much I want to make things right." I hesitated at first, unsure if I wanted to delve into her private thoughts. But as I read through the pages, I saw a side of Rachel I hadn't fully understood before. She wrote about her guilt, her shame, and her determination to become a better partner. She also wrote about the small moments of hope she felt when we laughed together or shared a quiet moment. One entry stood out to me. "Alex is the best thing that ever happened to me. I know I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'm going to spend every day earning it. I want him to know that he's enough. He's always been enough." Her words brought tears to my eyes. For the first time, I felt like I was truly seeing the depth of her regret and her commitment to change. As the weeks turned into months, Rachel and I continued to work on our relationship, both in therapy and at home. We started carving out time for each other, date nights, weekend getaways, and even simple walks around the neighborhood. These moments reminded me of the early days of our marriage, when everything felt new and exciting. One weekend, we decided to visit a cabin in the woods, far away from the noise and distractions of everyday life. It was a place we had gone to during our honeymoon, and returning there felt symbolic, a way to reconnect with the foundation of our relationship. As we sat by the fire, Rachel turned to me and said, "Alex, I know I've said this before, but thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance. I promise I won't let you down." Her words carried weight, but they also carried hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same team again. After months of rebuilding, Rachel and I found ourselves in a much better place. The tension that once hung in the air had started to lift, replaced by cautious optimism. But despite the progress, there were moments that tested the fragile trust we were rebuilding. One such moment came when Rachel's job required her to attend an out-of-town networking event. It was the first time since the affair that she would be traveling alone, and I could feel the unease building in my chest as the date approached. "I'll call you every night," Rachel said reassuringly as she packed her bag. "I want you to feel comfortable while I'm gone." I nodded, trying to mask my anxiety. "I trust you, Rachel," I said, but the words felt more like a mantra than a certainty. While she was away, she kept her promise. She called me every night, sometimes even video chatting to show me where she was and what she was doing. Still, my mind raced with what-ifs. It wasn't until she returned home, exhausted but happy, that I realized I had spent the entire weekend worrying about something that never happened. That experience taught me an important lesson. Trust isn't just about the other person's actions. It's also about learning to let go of the fear that lingers after betrayal. As Rachel and I continued to work on our relationship, I began to notice subtle but significant changes in her behavior. She was more attentive, more present, and more willing to open up about her emotions. In turn, I found myself softening toward her, letting go of some of the anger I had been holding on to. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, Rachel turned to me and said, "Alex, I've been thinking a lot about how I can show you that I'm committed to us. I want us to create new memories together, good ones that can replace the bad." Her suggestion led to a series of small adventures, trying new restaurants, taking a pottery class together, and even volunteering at a local animal shelter. These experiences helped us reconnect in ways we hadn't anticipated, reminding us of why we fell in love in the first place. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt and pain, but each step forward felt like a small victory. For the first time, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could build something stronger than what we had before. Things between Rachel and me were improving, but life has a way of testing you just when you start to feel stable again. One afternoon, while I was grocery shopping, I ran into Eric. The sight of him stopped me in my tracks. He was standing a few aisles away, casually looking at a shelf like he hadn't played a role in the biggest heartbreak of my life. My instinct was to walk away, to avoid any interaction with him. But something inside me, the lingering anger, the need for closure, made me approach him. "Eric," I said, my voice steady but firm. He turned, his face briefly registering surprise before settling into something that resembled guilt. "Alex," he said. "Hey, I didn't want small talk. What were you thinking?" I asked, my voice low enough not to draw attention but laced with emotion. "You knew she was married. You knew what you were doing." Eric sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. I don't have an excuse. It was selfish and wrong. I'm sorry, Alex. For whatever that's worth." I stared at him for a moment, debating whether to say more. But the truth was, nothing he could say would undo what had happened. "Stay out of our lives," I said simply before walking away. When I got home, I told Rachel about the encounter. She looked genuinely upset, her face pale as I recounted what had happened. "I hate that you had to see him," she said. "I wish I could erase everything he represents." "I don't want you to feel guilty forever, Rachel," I said. "But seeing him reminded me of how far we've come and how far we still have to go." Rachel nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know I can't change the past, but I promise I'll keep working to rebuild what we lost." "You deserve that." Her reaction reassured me. She didn't get defensive or try to shift the focus. She simply acknowledged my feelings and reiterated her commitment to making things right. As the months went on, I began to notice a change in myself. The anger that had once consumed me started to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Therapy helped me process the pain and understand that while Rachel's actions had hurt me deeply, they didn't define our entire relationship. One session, Dr. Hayes asked us to reflect on what we had learned from this experience. Rachel said she had learned the importance of communication and vulnerability, while I admitted that I had learned to be more present and attentive in our marriage. It's not about blaming yourselves or each other, Dr. Hayes said. It's about recognizing the patterns that led to this and working together to create something healthier and stronger. Her words stuck with me. I realized that while Rachel's betrayal had been a breaking point, it also forced us to confront issues we had ignored for years. In a strange way, it had become a catalyst for growth. On our anniversary, Rachel surprised me with a thoughtful gesture. She had planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains, a place we had always talked about visiting but never had the chance to. As we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the trees, Rachel turned to me and said, "Alex, I want this to be a new beginning for us. I know I've hurt you, and I'll never stop trying to make it right. But I also want us to focus on the future, on what we can build together." Her words resonated deeply. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but it no longer felt like an insurmountable burden. We were finally moving forward. Forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a choice you make every day. For me, forgiving Rachel didn't mean forgetting what had happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It meant choosing to focus on the progress we had made and the love that still existed between us. Rachel and I aren't the same people we were before the affair, and that's okay. The experience changed us, but it also gave us a chance to rebuild our marriage on a stronger foundation. We've learned to communicate better, to prioritize each other, and to never take our relationship for granted. Looking back, I realized that healing isn't about erasing the pain. It's about finding meaning in the struggle and using it to grow. Rachel and I still have our challenges, but for the first time in years, I feel hopeful about our future. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, know that it's okay to feel hurt, angry, or unsure. Take your time, trust your instincts, and remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. It has been over a year since I discovered Rachel's affair, and while life isn't perfect, I can confidently say that we've come a long way. Looking back, I realized that the journey we've taken wasn't just about healing our marriage, it was about rediscovering ourselves as individuals and as partners. This final chapter of our story is not just about forgiveness, but about the growth we've both experienced. Forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. For months, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Some days, I felt hopeful and optimistic about our future. Other days, the pain of betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. I would see Rachel laughing at something on TV or humming while she cooked dinner, and a part of me would wonder how she could seem so happy after everything that had happened. But as time passed, I realized that Rachel wasn't pretending to be happy. She was trying to find joy again, not just for herself but for us. Her commitment to rebuilding our relationship was unwavering. She attended every therapy session, kept her promise of transparency, and went out of her way to show me that she was fully invested in our marriage. Whether it was through small gestures like leaving me notes in my lunchbox or planning date nights, Rachel consistently showed me that she was willing to put in the work. One of the most pivotal moments came during a therapy session. Dr. Hayes asked us to write letters to each other, expressing our feelings about the affair and what we wanted for the future. Reading Rachel's letter brought tears to my eyes. She wrote, "Alex, I know I broke your trust, and I'll never stop regretting the pain I caused you. But I also know that we've built something beautiful together, something worth fighting for. I don't want to let my mistakes define us. I want to grow with you, love you, and prove to you every day that I'm the partner you deserve." Her words hit me deeply. They reminded me of the Rachel I had fallen in love with, the Rachel who was kind, thoughtful, and genuine. For the first time, I felt a shift in my heart. I wasn't fully ready to forgive her yet, but I realized that I wanted to try. One of the hardest parts of rebuilding our marriage was restoring intimacy, not just physical but emotional intimacy as well. The trust that had been shattered made it difficult to open up to each other, but we both knew that vulnerability was essential for healing. We started with small steps. We made a rule to have no phone evenings, where we focused entirely on each other without distractions. We revisited places that held special meaning for us, like the park where we had our first picnic and the coffee shop where we used to spend lazy Sunday mornings. These moments helped us reconnect and reminded us of the bond we had before things fell apart. One night, while stargazing on our back porch, Rachel turned to me and said, "Do you think we'll ever be like we were before?" I thought about it for a moment before replying. "No, I don't think we'll ever be the same. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to be the same. Maybe we're supposed to be stronger, wiser, and more aware of what we mean to each other. She smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. I like that idea. Eventually, we decided to renew our vows, not as a way to erase the past, but as a way to reaffirm our commitment to each other. It was a small ceremony with just a few close friends and family members. As we stood under a canopy of string lights in our backyard, Rachel looked at me with a mixture of love and gratitude. Alex, she said during her vows, I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you. But standing here today, I promise to love you with everything I have, to be honest and loyal, and to never take what we have for granted. Thank you for giving us a second chance. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. Rachel, I won't pretend that this journey has been easy, but I will say this. I've seen your effort, your growth, and your love. I know now that we're stronger together than we are apart. I promise to keep choosing us every single day. The ceremony felt like a turning point. It wasn't a magical fix or a cure-all, but it symbolized our willingness to keep fighting for our marriage. Looking back, I've realized that the affair wasn't just a test of our relationship. It was a test of who we are as individuals. Rachel learned to confront her insecurities and communicate her needs, while I learned to be more present and attentive. We both discovered the importance of vulnerability, honesty, and forgiveness. But the most important lesson was this. Love isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. It's about making a choice every day to show up for each other, even when it's hard. Rachel and I have scars, but those scars are a testament to the battles we've fought and the growth we've achieved. Rachel and I still have our challenges, but we've found a rhythm that works for us. We continue to attend therapy occasionally, not because we're struggling, but because we want to maintain the progress we've made. We've also started new traditions, like Friday movie nights and annual trips to the mountains, to keep our connection strong. For anyone reading this who's going through something similar, know this. Healing is possible, but it takes time, effort, and a mutual willingness to grow. It's okay to feel hurt and angry, and it's okay to take your time to decide what you want. Whether you choose to stay or go, make sure it's a choice that honors your worth and your happiness. As for me and Rachel, we're not perfect, but we're trying. And sometimes that's enough.